achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I'm your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC 173 event, which will take place on May 24th from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions on this episode of the show, including the main event bantamweight title fight. All my preliminary breakdowns will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, along with all of the panel's predictions, so have to check them out as well. I'm coming off a fairly unsuccessful UFC Fight Night 40 event. It's not that shocking that I did that poorly, considering I had 8 upsets on 13 fights, the second most in the history of the UFC, only beaten by the 9 we saw at UFC Fight Night 38. Now, although I didn't do well with my bet packs, I did steer you clear of betting on guys like Eric Koch and Eddie Wineland, and I suggested bets on guys like Matt Brown and Darren Cruikshank, so these are solid bets you certainly should look into. So I made a little bit of money and prevented losses elsewhere, so hopefully that you were able to take advantage of that as well. I'll be doing my bet pack for this event, so certainly consider purchasing it. UFC 173 looks like a pretty promising card. Now, we have a ton of events coming up in the very not-too-distant future, including, I think, 2 events next weekend and on one day. So I'm toying with the idea of doing one massive show and just doing all my preliminary predictions and everything in one major podcast, simply because it would be too much of an undertaking to get all my predictions done and do an effective job. So I'll be looking into that into the future. So please tune in for that. And again, I apologize if I don't go thoroughly into my picks as I normally do, but either way, we've got to find a way to get through this massive, overwhelming number of fights. Now, the Bellator pay-per-view took place last night. I don't know if you purchased it and watched it, but I certainly purchased the pay-per-view and watched it and enjoyed it. It was a pretty solid night of fights. The main event wasn't that strong. I had a good run. I had put money down on Tito Ortiz, Alexander Volkov, and Yamaguchi. I was Yamaguchi earlier in the night, and I capped it off with King Mo. I didn't bet on Chandler. I felt Will Brooks had a chance to win. I didn't feel he was worth a bet, but I stayed away from that one. Either way, the main event was pretty weak, but other than that, the rest of the card was fine. And there's a lot of talk about Tito Ortiz beating the middleweight champion, would certainly hurt that image. But the lightweight division becomes very interesting as of right now. Either way, we've got 5 very good fights on this main card coming up, so let's get to the very first prediction of the night. We jumpstart things in the UFC's lightweight division as former WEC champion, 21-9-1 with 2 no contests, Jamie Varner battles James, and I love his nickname, the James Krause, with a record of 20 wins and just 5 losses. Now, as I said, both guys are former WEC guys. Varner obviously a far more successful run of the promotion. Krause had a couple appearances there. I don't think he actually had a win. Both individuals are coming off shocking losses. Varner was KO'd by Abel Trujillo in a very impressive a back-and-forth battle that he nearly had Trujillo finished a couple of times, while Krause lost with that weird low blow body kick situation against Bobby Green, eventually went down to the TKO defeat, and they'll both be looking to bounce back here. Obviously, only one of them can. Physically, Krause has some solid advantages, 4 inches of reach and 6 inches of height over Varner. Both guys have double-digit submission numbers. Krause, 22 submission wins. That shows how dangerous this guy is on the mat. Varner, no slouch, though, 11 submission wins of his own, and obviously I think he's been fighting at a higher level against better competition despite having less fights. Krause, as I said, very good submission fighter, long limbs, which allows him to attack with submissions off his back and on top that normally other fighters can't look for. He's very aggressive off his back when he gets put down, and he did catch Sam Stout, who's a tough guy to submit. He caught him late in that fight and put him away. For Jamie Varner, he's a very good wrestler, solid top game, good submissions. Statistically, he averages 3.55 takedowns at 54% per fight, which is pretty impressive and shows he can dominate with his wrestling. Now, the big number that stands out for me for Krause, 14% takedown defense. Now, I know he's talented on the ground and he's willing to go to the fight ground, but you cannot afford to spend too much time on your back, because that's not a position a lot of people win fights from in this day and age. He was taken down twice by Sammy Stout, who's not known for his wrestling, and he has 3 of his 6 losses have come by submission, so he's certainly vulnerable on the mat. Now, Jamie Varner, though far from invincible, 4 submission losses as well. The guys he's been submitted by, Joe Lozon, Ben Henderson, a couple very talented submission guys there. He needs to be careful against Krause. He cannot leave his neck out there or a limb out there that Krause has an opportunity to attack. On the feet, Varner has very big power, and he can cover a lot of distance with his hands. It's very impressive the way he can come forward. That's what he did against Barboza. He caught him off guard, landed some big shots, and eventually put him away. He's aggressive, but it can cost him. Again, we watched the Abel Trujillo fight. It was his first knockout of his career, so I wonder if that makes him rethink his approach to taking damage. Either way, Trujillo's got some serious power, and as much as I like Krause, I don't think he has the power of Trujillo, so that won't be as big an issue. Krause, 8 wins by knockout, though, so certainly has the capability. He has some power, probably a little more diverse than Jamie Varner in the striking capabilities. abilities. Solid kicking arsenal. He throws a number of good kicks, push kicks, high kicks, stuff that keeps guys backing up, and he uses his reach fairly effectively. Now, Krause is going to need to keep Varner on the outside to avoid getting tagged and to set up that kicking game. Varner, he's good at getting in close. He does that very effectively, and I think this is going to neutralize Krause's kicking game. I expect to see Varner use some takedowns to score with both positional control and some solid ground and pound. The gas tank of Varner has been an issue, but in the Tyson Tebow fight, he rallied back late. He needs a big win here. This is a tough fight for him. He needs a W here, and he's a solid veteran. I think he goes out and gets it. Varner, I think he used solid wrestling against Mullen Gallard to put that fight in a position where he could win it. He grounded out. I think he'll get on the inside here. I think he outpoints James Krause. So my prediction is Jamie Varner to defeat James Krause by decision. In our next matchup, we are in the UFC's bantamweight division for a fight I'm very much looking forward to, as the number 6 ranked Takeya Mizugaki, 19-7-2, battles the number 7th ranked Francisco Cisco Rivera with a record of 10 wins, 2 losses, and a single no contest, which came in the UFC. Now, winner of this fight could make a significant climb into title contention. Keep in mind, Takeya Mizugaki was supposed to be facing TJ Dillashaw at this event before the shit hit the fan, and Dillashaw got bumped up to the main event to fight Renan Barao for the title. Mizugaki comes in a 4-fight winning streak, which is pretty impressive, the best of his career, at least of his UFC WEC career. Rivera is undefeated in his last 5, which is just with a single no contest against Roland Delorme mixed in there. Big numbers for Rivera: 7 of his 10 wins have come by knockout. For Mizugaki, 13 of his 19 wins have come by decision, so they both have a key way that they pick up most of their victories by. Rivera has big time power, no denying that. We saw him stop Edwin Figueroa. He put George Roop down, and before it was turned into no contest, he stopped Roland Delorme. So this guy can put guys' lights out, and he's very capable of doing that. 4.46 strikes landed per minute, so not only does he have power, he throws at a high work rate. Does give up 3.07 strikes absorbed per minute, so he gets hit a lot, but that power exchange is something that he keys on. He says, you're going to hit me, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to hit you harder, and it's going to show up in the end. He does throw some very hard combinations. He has a nice solid uppercut. Excellent killer instinct. When he hurt George Roop, he landed some good shots on Roop early, but he didn't go in for the kill too aggressively. And then eventually, when he saw he had him hurt, then he overwhelmed him, and then he put him down. Now, he chambers his punches very effectively. He doesn't overextend himself, too frequently. He gets good use out of his length, and that was the difference against the Figueroa fight. Well, Figueroa was whipping wild punches. Rivera was in there sticking his shots in there as well and just simply outworked him and just out-techniqued him in the end. Now, he did get hurt in that fight early on, and he was struggling a little bit with his aggressive opponent who was throwing a lot of volume his way, and that's something that we'll have to see how that plays out here, because Takeya Mizugaki is a very capable striker. He can fight at range, but he's also equally effective, if not more effective, when he's in close. He throws short, tight, crisp strikes. Will work his uppercut very effectively. Solid hook punches that he can really work around an opponent's guard, and he will go to the body as well, and he can do some serious damage and really hamper an opponent's gas tank when he starts targeting that body. He's also very effective when he gets his opponent pinned on the cage, and with short, quick strikes. That's how he finished Cole Escovedo when he started getting some notoriety when he joined the UFC. He started putting some big shots on him there. Statistically, 3.49 strikes landed per minute, so not the numbers Rivera puts up, but he can still land some big shots. The big concern is 3.20 strikes absorbed per minute, so very close in these numbers, which makes his fights much closer than they need to be. If he could tighten up and get that number below 2.5, he's certainly going to find it easier to win decisions when his opponents aren't landing nearly as frequently. In the Nam Pham fight, he outlanded Nam consistently, hurt him, but he couldn't finish him, and he had a bit of trouble later in that matchup. Now, when you look at this matchup, both guys are solid strikers, but Mizugaki could have the edge in quickness, and his close-range striking could allow him to beat Rivera to the punch on frequent occasions, although Rivera only needs one opportunity to put you down. Ground game, I think, is going to be a big decider in this fight. Rivera submitted in his UFC debut by Ruben Duran. He was taken down by George Roop. Figueroa took him down, as Duran took him down. Even Alex Soto took him down 3 times. 66% takedown defense, but he can be taken off his feet. Mizugaki, excellent wrestling despite only having one win and one loss, or a 1-1 record in fights ended by submission. He has solid control and excellent ground and pound. 1.82 takedowns at 65%, which don't look like overwhelming numbers, but he had 3 takedowns against Nam Pham, 2 against Eric Perez, 4 against Jeff Hoagland, 2 against Chris Carriasso. So he's put up some decent takedown numbers in the past, and I expect him to look for that here. Solid body lock takedowns, close, get in there, establish control, and trip his opponent, put him on the back. And that's really going to test Rivera's ground game and his gas tank, and I think that's a big issue. He's far from a first-round fighter, but he does slow down as fights go on, especially if they get aggressive. Mizugaki needs to survive the early onslaught, especially like he did against Eric Perez, and turn the fight in his favor with a consistent an effective attack. I think he'll take control as this fight progresses. He'll land some takedowns early. He needs to watch that chin though. But my prediction is Takeya Mizugaki to defeat Francisco Rivera by decision. The solid fights roll on, and we go to the UFC's welterweight division as the former title challenger, number 1 ranked Ruthless Robbie Lawler with a record of 22 wins, 10 losses, and 1 no contest. Battles number 5 ranked Jake the Juggernaut Ellenberger, a fighter who's yet to get that title opportunity, but certainly sees this as a chance to put himself in a position to ask for it. Now, as it's a title fight potentially on the line, maybe 2 wins away for Ellenberger. I think Lawler could get right back in there, depending on what the situation is. Lawler's coming off a fight with Hendricks, which he was on the verge of winning. I took Lawler to win that matchup. He won rounds 3 and 4, and it was a close 5 until that takedown landed. Arguably, he faced a better version of what Jake Ellenberger is going to bring him today in Johnny Hendricks, but Ellenberger does do some things a little bit differently. Ellenberger's coming off a very poor showing versus Rory McDonald, which took place 10 months ago, so he's had some time off, which is a concern. But then again, you have to think with Robbie Lawler, he's coming off a title fight loss. How does that affect his psyche? He seems to be dealing with it very well and approaching it the right way. And but some fighters, it can affect them terribly when they lose that title fight. They think, where do I go from here in my next appearance? Now, what we have here is Lawler's defensive wrestling against Jay Ellenberger's offensive wrestling. That's going to be a big storyline in this matchup. Lawler can be taken down. He's been taken down 8 times in his fights, combined 8 times against Johnny Hendricks, Rory McDonald, and Josh Koscheck, but he gets up very quickly. He's hard to keep down. Ellenberger, 2.69 takedowns at 55%. He will look for takedowns, but it's not essential to his success, and that's something to keep in mind as well, as he doesn't have to put you on your back to beat you. Most likely, this fight's going to be contested on the feet, the way I see it playing out. Both men have power. Both have identical records of 18 wins by knockout and just 1 loss by knockout, which is impressive. Shows a lot of power and solid chins. But Ellenberger's loss was a little more recent, which was against Martin Kampmann. Lawler got put down in the UFC way back. I can't remember the event, but it was by Nick Diaz in one heck of a matchup. Now, Lawler put on an impressive performance in face of a very dangerous striker in Johnny Hendricks, and that's something to keep in mind, especially when you look at the way Ellenberger responded to facing a very good striker in Rory McDonald. I like the way Lawler rolls with punches. He throws counters. He throws them very hard. He has brutal power in both hands, but he also is effective with his leg kicks. He can stop guys with head kicks, and he has a flying knee. We saw him throw against Adlan Amagov and put him away back in Strikeforce. He's an all-around, he's a multifaceted striking threat. Lawler's strikes landed per minute versus strikes absorbed is a concern, mostly almost equal, but again, he relies on that power. I'll hit you, you hit me, and we'll see who's still standing. What I didn't like about the Hendricks fight, he was way too willing to get hit by Hendricks. He was rolling instead of defending. It's fine to roll with punches and try and counter, but if you're letting a guy hit you and you're not responding and keeping up, it's going to add up, and judges see those shots landing and they don't maybe anticipate, okay, we can't tell the impact exactly, so you need to either match or get out of the way of some of those. Ellenberger on the feet does a much better job of limiting his opponents, just 1.95 strikes absorbed per minute. He only lands at a rate of 2.47, so a slight edge to Lawler there, but still Ellenberger makes his strikes effective. Juggernaut, he's been improving with his striking. He looks to use more and more movement each fight. He's pretty light on his feet for a heavy, not a heavier guy, but you know what I mean. He's a stocky guy, and he can land with big powers. We've seen him knock a number of guys off their feet and put them away. Jake Shields, Nate Marquardt, he almost finished Martin Kampmann before that fight turned on its heels. He looked tentative against Rory McDonald. Even against Jay Hiran, he slowed down. He struggled a little bit to get going. And I think the power of Lawler is going to create some issues for Jake Ellenberger. I think Lawler simply, his diversity, power, and his aggression is going to be the difference in this matchup. He needs to avoid the letdown after that title fight loss. He needs to get off to a good start here. He's only a winner, so maybe 2 away from a rematch. But my prediction here is Robbie Lawler to defeat Jake Ellenberger by knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, the number 4 ranked light heavyweight on the planet and former Strikeforce heavyweight Grand Prix champion DC Daniel Cormier, with an undefeated record of 14 wins and no losses, takes on the number 6 ranked Dan Henderson with a record of 30 wins and 11 losses. Dan Henderson's been all around the world. Won titles everywhere with the exception of the UFC. Now, this is a title eliminator. They've put that on the line already, and the winner could get the next shot at the gold, especially if it is Daniel Cormier. This is Cormier's first real fight at 205 pounds. His first attempt was short against a real, Patrick Cummings, who, just filled in with the fight because no one else would take it. But the big thing with Cormier there is he made the weight. He was able to get in the cage. He got to feel a little bit about that, even though it was very short, and that's important. Now, this is a fight of guys. Keep in mind, this is a guy who formerly fought at heavyweight, taking a guy who's fought at middleweight in the past. Just keep putting that in perspective. But the interesting thing is, Dan, by the numbers at least, has a slight edge in size, but that's not an issue for Cormier at all to fight guys who could be a little bit bigger, and I doubt it's even going to show up. It'll be negligible. But if you're concerned at all about that. I don't think you see why you would be, because all you have to do is watch Daniel Cormier versus Bigfoot Silva for proof that Cormier does not give a shit about fighting bigger men. Now, both guys, high-level wrestlers. Edge could lie with Cormier based on his in-cage performance and what he's done in the past. Dan seems to rely less and less on his wrestling. Every fight we see him, one takedown or less over his last 6 appearances. The last time he went over one takedown was in his Strikeforce title fight win when he defeated Rafael Feijóo. He landed a grand total of 3. Now, Cormier doesn't use a lot of wrestling either, but he has put up some decent numbers in specific fights. But he's also gone many fights without landing takedowns, choosing to rely mainly on his striking. Now, we did see Cormier use a clinch-style approach against guys like Roy Nelson and Frank Mir. I could see him doing that against Dan Henderson to try and wear him down, control him on the cage, and really test Dan Henderson's gas tank. Most wrestler versus wrestler bouts, as this one is, are decided on the feet, and I can really expect to see a lot of that transpire here. Both guys have big power. We know what Dan Henderson's capable of: 14 knockouts. He has the H-bomb. Daniel Cormier, 8 knockouts. Dan has the far more impressive list of victims, but Cormier showed, especially heavyweight, he can throw and knock guys down, so there's no reason he can't do it at light heavyweight either. As I mentioned, Dan has the H-bomb, but he's struggled to land it against more sophisticated strikers, guys like Rashad Evans and Lyoto Machida. I wouldn't put Daniel Cormier there quite yet, but he's certainly above average as far as his technique is concerned and his ability to avoid punches. I expect to see Dan struggle here as well to put a big shot on Cormier's chin. He was able to catch a potentially overconfident Shogun when he got in close. Shogun hurt him a couple of times and probably let his guard down, and that's Dan Henderson capitalized it. We look at Henderson, 5 of his last 6 wins have come by knockout. The lone win that wasn't by knockout was the first fight against Shogun. And Cormier has shown he can win fights without knocking guys out, even though I don't think it's going to be an issue here. But Dan certainly has to, land that big shot to be successful. Cormier is the far more diverse striker. He has just simply put a better arsenal. He will be faster, and especially as Dan slows down. Again, I'm not 100% sold on Cormier as a light heavyweight, but Dan doesn't have the late fight tools to exploit a tired fighter. Even though this is a 3-round fight, I still think Cormier should have the advantage if it happens to go deep. The kicking game could be a big edge for Cormier too, as he likes to throw some solid body kicks and head kicks. And I think that shows up here as Dan does not do nearly as much as that. Dan's cardio has been a major issue, and now his chin appears to be an issue as well. That's probably age catching up with him. He was stopped by Vitor, dropped twice by Shogun. Can he take a big shot from a former heavyweight? I really doubt it. That's the million-dollar question here. Don't be shocked if Cormier tries to use a little bit of wrestling early on like he did against Barnett. If he can hold Dan down and do some damage, he will exhaust him even quicker. That's a possibility. Dan has to land that H-bomb or hope that Cormier gasses really bad really quickly. So it allowed him to get the better of him. This is the first non-TRT fight for Dan Henderson. I said it in the last fight. I was obviously mistaken. Either way, Dan says he'll be fine, but he wouldn't say otherwise. I don't think so. I think his chin is done. I think his gas tank is worse than it was before. So my prediction is Daniel Cormier to defeat Dan Henderson by knockout. Heading to the main event now, we are in the UFC's Bantamweight division as the very dominant Bantamweight champion, Renan the Baron Barao, 34 wins, just a single loss and 1 no contest, taking on Ultimate Fighter product number 4 ranked TJ Dillashaw with a record of 10 wins, 2 losses, and no draws. Now this fight, keep in mind, was thrown together to fill a void after the original main event was lost. I believe it was Machida Weidman that went down, and they looked at this fight to get it lined up. So, and Dillashaw wasn't even the first choice for this fight. I believe Rafael Assunção was offered it, but had to bow out because of an injury. Now Barao, he's on a massive winning streak. He's undefeated over his last 33 fights with a single no contest where he was hit with a soccer kick mixed into that. He's 7-0 in the UFC, plus 3 straight title defenses. This guy is on a roll. Dillashaw's no slouch, but his numbers pale in comparison. He's 5-2 in the UFC. He's only 1 fight removed from a split decision loss to the aforementioned Assunção. But I said he wasn't hurt. He was hurt and couldn't take the title shot when it was offered to him. Now this is another one of those matchups of alpha male and Nova União. And right now Nova União in the fights that really matter has dominated. Jose Aldo defeated Faber. He also defeated Chad Mendes, which is going to be rehashed again. Barao's beaten Faber twice. We look at the one that, as far as the big marquee fighters, Joseph Benavidez got one back for alpha male when he knocked out Jussier Formiga. But either way, when it comes to title fights and big matchups, it's been all Nova União coming into this one. Now, Barao's been lights out. He's got back-to-back wins over Faber, and that has to do something to the confidence of TJ Dillashaw, knowing that the best fighter, arguably the best fighter in the alpha male camp, has not had any success in 2 separate fights against this man, and that has to be playing a little bit of a role in TJ's brain ahead. I know he's confident, but if any doubt starts to creep in, that fact will tear it wide open. Now, Dillashaw, his striking has been improving, but this is a whole other level of opponent. He looked very good against Mike Easton, but he was in tough in rounds 2 and 3 against Rafael Sunsao, and Barao is just someone on another level compared to all of those. Barao has a wide variety of weapons. He hits incredibly hard. He's very fast, and he manages distance very well. And that was the key to his success against Uriah Faber in the first fight and against Scotty Jorgensen before he had the title. He kept them out of range, and he limited their offensive attack. Now, Dillashaw, for me, he needs to push the pace here. Get on the inside, test Barao's cardio, try to find some success with his wrestling, and he can't stand and trade with Barao because he simply will lose the decision or will get himself knocked out like Eddie Wineland just did. Dillashaw, he does have power. There's no denying that. And he could clip Barao early, but it's unlikely. He has shown some vulnerability in the feet in fights. We saw him against Von Lee get backed up. Hugo Viana landed some decent shots, and we know John Dodson put him away, too, with a big KO punch in the Ultimate Fighter finale. I think it's going to be very, very hard for TJ to get his wrestling going, even though that would be a key factor in his success. Uriah Faber in the first fight went 0 for 6. Scott Jorgensen went 0 for 7. And Renan Barao, as is not a shocker, the Nova Union takedown defense or defensive wrestling is fantastic. 95% takedown defense, very hard to take off his feet. Now, TJ is an NCAA Division I wrestler, 3.04 takedowns at 48%. He's very effective with his wrestling game. Can put his opponent on his back very quickly, and he goes to work. He's very aggressive from the top position. Again, I don't think he'll be able to get it there, and especially not with any regularity. He has solid submission games. He almost caught a BJJ black belt in Sunsao on the mat. We saw him submit Von Lee. If he doesn't get a submission, he needs to outwork Barao on the floor, use that ground and pound continuous action. And but the problem is Renan Barao, he's very active on his back. He could even turn the tables. We've seen him land a lot of takedowns of his own, go offensively. As I said, Nova União, known for the wrestling offensively as well. We could see Barao do that. He landed 4 takedowns against Mayday McDonald. Solid top game, excellent submission capabilities. He's got 14 subs on his career. A lot of people don't know that because he's so capable with his striking. He's a BJJ black belt. He's he's all around effective and dominant champion. Dillashaw, he could be in trouble. I don't know how much time a wrestler like him has spent fighting off his back, especially with a high-level guy like Barao on top of him. Either way, there are simply too many areas where Renan Barao is better than TJ Dillashaw, and outside of a big strike landing or Barao not taking the fight seriously or gassing out hard after 2 rounds, I don't see Dillashaw winning this fight. So my prediction is Renan Barao to defeat TJ Dillashaw by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC 173 event. This is a little bit of a longer show. I know I talked a lot about each one of these fights. My intro is a little bit longer. But nonetheless, I appreciate, as always, you guys listening to the very end. Please check out KamikazeOverdrive.net for all my preliminary breakdowns, all of the panel's predictions. Please vote as well on your own prediction, or on in the polls, so we can see who you think is going to take these down. This should be a very good card. We have a ton of MMA coming ahead of us. And as always, thank you very much.